Ew. Yeah, you all don't want to hear my nonsense. Um, and there's Ben. Hey everyone. Sue Birch here, Executive Director of Nevada Now. Thank you all for popping on. We've got a lot of talent coming on here today, and I'm very excited because it's very important subject matter. Um, I was very negligent last meeting because I did not acknowledge Women's History Month, so I apologize for not doing that. Um, and we had some great women on last time, five outstanding women in Nevada. And we have two of our guests are phenomenal women here in Nevada, so we truly appreciate them and are looking forward to this conversation. I've got a couple of board members on here. Um, where'd you go? There you are, Sarah. Your little square moved. Sarah Evans is our director of fundraising and my go-to on a lot of stuff, as well as her work with the DFS, right? Director, yeah, and SEIU 1107. So we're always happy to have Sarah jump in on stuff. And I think she's going to end up leading most of the discussion today. Uh, Dr. Liz is on here somewhere. I just saw her. She is our resident sociologist and helps us a lot with narrative on things. And so I'm glad she's here in person and not her note taker. So yay, thank you, Liz. Uh, that she
Hey,
that she
Sue.
are you still at the kickball game?
No, I'm driving home from the kickball
The
game. You know
kickball.
me well.
The National Action Network youth were having a kickball game. It's always the youth
Yeah.
against the adults.
And the
Who
youth
won?
won for the first time. This is probably our fourth community game
Ex-
against the youth, giving them a chance to just meet those that are in place to serve them. And they actually won tonight.
They won
So,
today. I know
yeah.
the adults have been holding it over them for a couple of years now. So well done. I know another few board members will pop on. I know Lenore is going to be a little late. She's our treasurer. I'm trying to think. I'm sure Laura will be here at some point. She's our director of action. Michelle Maese has other priorities this afternoon, and she's our director of outreach. Who am I missing? We've got a
Hey,
couple.
Sue, Jerry says she's having trouble getting in. Should we repaste? I can repaste the link over to that chat.
Okay,
Just wanted to give you a heads up.
thank you. Um, then let's see, we got a couple of students that are off at going to school, one in Virginia, one in North Carolina. So we wish them the best as they finish up their years. Who am I forgetting? Oh, Jordan Chamiso from ACLU. She's our social media queen. And I don't think I've left anybody off, but oh, Shanze. I should forgot about Shanze. Shanze may pop on. She's our director of what is a community coalition and some program coordinator. Um, she is tied up with some family stuff last minute, so she may pop on here. So welcome all of you. We're just about halfway through our legislative session. I just looked it up. We're on the 56th day and things are moving and grooving. This recording will go out to our membership and will be posted on our YouTube channel. So lots of information to get to. I'm going to have, I don't know where Jagada is. I'm sure he'll be here eventually, but I'm going to have our three guests introduce themselves real quickly. And oh, Lenore can get in now. Introduce themselves real quickly, and then for a couple of minutes, and then we'll go back around and really get into the stuff. So, Yesenia, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you do in the community.
Hi, everybody. My name is Yesenia. I know a lot of folks on this call, but my name is Yesenia Moya. I'm a local organizer, educator, and artist. I wear many hats, and I try and support as many folks as I can. Today, I'm going to be talking specifically about immigration, what it is, what it isn't. I grew up undocumented, and so there's a very particular expertise that comes with being an impacted person in that particular space and then fighting for immigration. And so, break some of that down, some of the historical facts, and just kind of where we're at. Um, and a lot of the work that I do has to do with us reclaiming our roots and our power as a way to organize and break through like colonialism and just the oppression that we're seeing on a daily basis. So thank you, Sue, for having me, and shout out to all the people I know on this call.
I mentioned the two amazing women, Yesenia and our next guest speaker. In 2023, they were the driving force on a bill, the Dignity for Incarcerated Women, that we are very appreciative to them for their work on it and letting us hang out with them and getting the work done. So thank you, Yesenia, for being here. And now I will turn it over to the incredible Leslie Turner.
Hey everyone, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I may have to turn my camera off because my internet is very unstable. But I'm Leslie. You all know me already, so I'm not gonna do a lengthy introduction. But I do definitely want to talk about some of the bills that are moving through the legislative session and that are important to our community. And um, obviously, the importance of bills is something to be, it's up for conversation, I guess you could say. But just as important as the bills we're supporting, there are also bills that we need to be in opposition to. So I definitely want to speak to those bills. And I wear a lot of different hats. So I'll be speaking on FFJC bills, but also Mass Liberation Project bills, which really we have like one major bill that we're trying to move. So whenever the mic comes back to me, then I can speak to that. And I'll pass it back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Leslie. And for the first time ever, and I'm so grateful that he's here, is Ben Innes.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Hello, all. My name is Ben Innes. I'm the coalition manager for the Nevada Housing Justice Alliance, which I think some folks might be familiar with. We are a statewide coalition based on grassroots organizing and community advocacy, really focused on fighting for the root cause solutions of our state's housing crisis. I think it's easy to kind of fall in sometimes to the supply narrative that, oh, we just need to build, or let's release the federal lands, and this and that, without really considering, the power imbalance between tenants and landlords, what that like lived experience is to be a tenant and to be a renter, and how precarious it can be. And so that is the core of our work, pushing for meaningful, long-term, lasting tenant protections that keep folks, not only stably housed, safely housed, but also I think, with power and dignity as well. So that's a little bit of what we do. I'll keep it short. Back to you, Sue.
Thanks, Ben. I know, nationally, immigration is on everybody's minds. So I am going to start with Yesenia because she works in the community and as advertised is my immigration specialist. And I know she has a lot of great information for us today. So Yesenia, go.
Thank you, Sue. So I think like there's a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, and just in general, like questions about what immigration is or like what the immigrant rights movement has been. and different terms that are out there. I know that I've been fielding questions from a lot of folks over the last few months about the work and kind of where it's going. And I want to say first and foremost, there's folks that are left out of the conversation when we think about immigration. Right now, there's a very xenophobic lens that is being led directly by this administration. But it's also not just this administration. Like historically, folks only think about one community or two communities. In particular, like Latinx communities is what they think about when they think about immigrant rights or immigrant movement or immigration in general. And so I want to just preface this by saying, like, forced displacement comes from a lot of different things. And there's so many different countries that the United States has somehow disrupted, has, war. There's just so many ways that the United States has impacted other communities that have forced people from their homes and had to migrate. Migration is something that's always been natural and it's historic. Like, people have been moving through. I'm originally from Chihuahua, and that's been a crossing place for thousands of years for our communities, for our indigenous folks. It Before colonialism, where I'm from, it was over 200 indigenous communities that lived there, and now there's only about 68 that are recognized in all of Mexico. And so those are just like some of historic context. Like, when it comes to immigration, there's way more that we need to think about. And so I always ask folks to please do research and think about the history of it and why there were borders imposed and why lines are written on a map, right? And who they were written by. So I think in the context of now, when I talk about immigration, I also
Yesenia, you're freezing. Do you want to turn your camera off?
this country, I saw how crimmigration is the term that we use. So crimmigration is the criminalization of immigration, was probably the worst and most used way for folks to get deported out of this country. And so that's kind of where my focus is over the last decade, on how to mitigate people coming in contact with the police, in particular here in Nevada. We're not a border state. And so the way that ICE works here, or CBP doesn't work here, that's Customs and Border Patrol. But in states like New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, California, they have ICE, CBP, and DHS working together. And local law enforcement works differently by state. And so in Nevada, we used to have 287G here in Las Vegas, which was a contract with the local sheriff's department. So Metro Sheriff Department and ICE had a contract where they then deputized 12 agents to become full-time ICE agents as they were sheriffs inside of our jails. In 2019, we were able to force them to get out of our jails and cut 287G. And so that program's no longer there. But Metro is still very much handing people over to ICE. And so the collaboration between local law enforcement and police, police, and ICE, we call it the Polimigra. And that's literally police and migra together. So the Polimigra is one arm of a larger way of people to kind of fall into the deportation pipeline. Every family has their own story of how folks ended up deported or how their family ended up separated. And so with that being said, I think the impact looks different state by state, location by location. And so the story here in Las Vegas in particular is about how do we stop community from coming in contact with Metro and with North Las Vegas Police Department. That is kind of the biggest thing that we can do, because we're not going to see giant raids yet like they are in the border state
He froze again, Yesenia.
Car, didn't have insurance, any kind, or let's say they're a street vendor and they don't have a license, then they're coming in contact with police. Due to legislation that was recently passed during the last legislative session, they criminalized street vending, and therefore a lot of our people ended up in the deportation pipeline. And so there's just so much that goes into it. People with good intentions can pass laws that then make it more hard, that make it more difficult for people to engage that are undocumented. And so that's where the story is here in Las Vegas in particular. Like, how do we stop that collaboration when it looks different? And I know that I've thrown out a lot of terms, but another term is the pulpo mira, which in Spanish, pulpo is octopus. And so mira, ice. So the pulpo mira, or the octopus ice monster, means that ICE has a lot of avenues into the into databases. So like databases at the DMV or the health department, getting like they are right now trying to get access to the IRS from the federal level. There's the ICE detainers, which they use like 287G, Polimira. There is them getting access to joint task forces when it's like DEA, DHS, FBI, CIA, ICE all together collaborating and doing different work. So like there's just that's what a pulpo mira is. It's a little octopus with different arms. And so what the immigrant rights movement has been trying to do over the last 30 years has really been trying to chop off these arms one by one. Unfortunately, sometimes when we do chop off one, another one grows, or they use another one more, and so that one gets stronger. But in the context of Nevada, we've been able to get rid of 287G down here, which made it safer. We were able to push for the decriminalization of traffic tickets because that meant less people were coming in contact with the police, and that's a huge shout out to Mass Liberation Project. And so through that work, like I think it's very important to understand that any kind of can literally end with somebody ending up in ICE detention here in Nevada in particular. So we're not going to see knocking door to door because we don't have the ICE police collaboration like they do in other states. And ICE doesn't have that many people here doing that. We're not going to see ICE checkpoints like they do within 100 miles of a border because that they have jurisdiction there, but they don't have jurisdiction here. And so what most of the time that we see, if we see an ICE van or we see an ICE, like a ICE SUV, they're transporting people from one jail to Henderson Detention Center, or they're transferring them from Henderson Detention Center out to Pahrump. What we do know is that here there has been an RFI, which is a request for information, and this was under the Biden administration last year, that ICE put out an RFI to all different states. Nevada was one of the ones that put it out, that answered. An RFI, or a request for information, is basically ICE putting out a contract bid. So now people have been bidding to open up a new detention center. So between and we're pretty sure that it's going to be opening up here soon. So the fear is that once those beds become available, then we're going to see a ramp up here of the criminalization and the crimmigration portion of that. And so how do we keep people safe here is checking in with your community, checking in with the people that you know that are undocumented. Do you have a safety plan in place? Like what happens if you do come in contact with police? Do you know how to make sure that you're safe? Do you know what you can or say or don't have to say in an interaction with police? And keeping people safe, like I said, looks different location by location. But do you have family members that don't have their driver's licenses? Do you have family members that are struggling to pay some car repairs, and now they don't have their plates because they can't pass the smog, or because they just don't have the money to fix their plates? So I think like that, if folks are interested in doing work, following folks that have been doing this work for a long time is crucial. In Nevada, we have Arriba Las Vegas Worker Center, which is a worker center that has been helping out various different communities. And one of the biggest wins over the last 2 years has been DALE, which is Deferred Action for Labor Enforcement. And what DALE has been able to do across the country is to give thousands of undocumented workers work permits. So the end, make sure that their deportations get deferred. What I mean by deferred is basically stopped while they're in litigation. And so what is happening is the Labor Department then gave protection to workers that have been telling them about wage theft or labor abuses by their employers. And so we've been able to protect workers that way. And so we see a lot of reactionary tactics popping up. And so my biggest thing is follow folks that are impacted, lean in with communities that have been doing this work for a long time, like TPS National and TPS Nevada. They are, if you don't know what TPS is, that's temporary protected status. But TPS National, they have been working for the last 8 years and more to ensure that folks from Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala get to keep their TPS, while also now they recently put in new litigation in San Francisco, for Venezuelans to stop their cancellation of TPS. And so that's why I want to keep saying over and over again, it's a very complicated system, but immigration is working how it's supposed to. It's supposed to keep out Black and Indigenous people from this country, and it continues to. And that's who's getting deported, not necessarily this narrative of like, oh, they're only going after criminals, I'm sure folks saw the flight of supposed gang members to El Seco in El Salvador. And the reality is there was a Venezuelan artist, youth, that got caught up in one of those raids. There was a father that got caught up in one of those raids. And there's just so many people that have been disappeared. In New Mexico, there were 23 US citizens that were disappeared in the system that nobody can find. So I think like the question right now is not who or what we can do, but it's like how. And so how do we do this work is literally by leaning in on those that have been doing the work already. It feels good that people are paying attention and want to be part of this work, but this fight has been ongoing for a long time. We have not had a historic win in the immigrant rights movement for decades. We're seeing the same tactics that we did back in the 1920s with the Bracero program, where they just picked up anybody that they said looked Mexican. We're seeing a pushback to Arizona from the early 2000s to the 2010, where they were doing show me your paper laws and, tent city with Arpaio. And so there's just so much to learn, so much that's already been done. And so I think just the different fights are like focus on workers, defending workers and their families, helping people stay safe. So ending any type of anytime that somebody comes in contact with police, leaning in when there's direct action. If there's community, then this has to be completely from directly impacted people. If they are asking, hey, show up to this ICE check, we need people to show up to an ICE check. What an ICE check is somebody who's in currently deportation proceedings has to check in with an ICE agent every single week. Now, some of them have an app on their phone that directly connects them to ICE at all times. Some folks have to go in person to check in. And so going in person has been some of those other points of contact where people have been ending up in deportation. And so those are just 3 different ways that folks can tap in. Arriba Las Vegas Worker Center, TPS National. There's Detention Watch Network, that's DWN. They put out a lot of information. They have some trainings coming up. Tap in with like any border town organizations like Puente Arizona. They've been doing a lot of work. If you want to know about any like historical context or any of the fight at the border conflict, listen or tap in with No Más Muertes, or No More Deaths. There's an organization that does mutual aid in the desert, helping people that have passed away and doing drop-offs of food and water at the place. So that there's just a lot that can be done. It's already being done, but you got to tap in with our people. And I can send links to these organizations to Stu.
Yes.
If that's cool to send out later, because I don't have them on me right now.
That was my next question is, and I had a feeling, yeah. So if we would be ever so grateful if you could give us links to these organizations, and I will get them out with the recording to this so everybody knows. Yeah, perfect question, Pamela. I wrote some of the names down, and Yesenia is good to her word. But yeah, there's been a lot of rumors, and I just wanted to have an opportunity, as Yesenia said, about some of the misinformation, or the not quite right information, or the not quite right action to take. So I truly appreciate you parking. So you could be a part of this, Yesenia. Does anybody have any questions for Yesenia? I'm going to take it off here.
I have a question.
Oh, go for it, Leslie.
Sorry, my computer's like tripping. I was gonna say, Yesenia, if maybe you can speak a little bit to how we're kind of seeing the expansion of crimmigration, how they're using it to kind of target people who speak out against like Palestine, for instance. And I'm pretty sure this is something that they've been doing, but I think that it's just more kind of in your face and without regard to like people's status. Like they don't care. This administration actually doesn't care if you have a legal status. Like you can still get swept up and you can still be targeted, especially if you're speaking out in particular about what's happening in Gaza.
Yes. So there's been a couple of folks. One, Khalid Mahmoud. He's a current political prisoner. He was picked up by ICE in his dorm at Columbia. He is a legal permanent resident, has been for a long time, married to a U.S. citizen, has a baby on the way. And he was basically turned over by the university because he was tagged as one of the student leaders that was really giving out a lot of information about how to be for Palestinians, and in particularly like what was happening in Gaza. And we're seeing that across the country. There are also folks that, like going back to early 2010s when we had like the sanctuary city movements, folks that had searched for sanctuary organizers, now they're in that have green card, they're also being detained. And so at this point, it's not as much about like undocumented people as much as it is like anybody that speaks out in dissent. We saw an uptake of in the last few years on attacks on people that are doing mutual aid, for example. And so that's a direct pipeline from organizing people that are marginalized straight into the pipeline of detention if you are somebody that has a status. And the way that the is kind of looking at things, there are some folks that are getting detained at the borders and not allowed to come in because they're checking through their cell phones. If you've ever come into the United States and you've never had your check phone checked by an ICE agent, I'm telling you that stuff is always scary. And also new data. There's a new that ICE is mining data from people's social medias to see who has been speaking out against this particular administration, but also in support. And so we have an old um, an old executive action or law that was kind of that Trump in particular put back, which was the Foreign Aliens Act, which he's using. And it's only supposed to be used during time of war, but that's the excuse that was used to detain Japanese Americans during World War II. And so we're, like I've mentioned before, we're seeing tactics that are being reused again and repackaged and brought out. But it really speaks to the fact that this administration, anybody that dissents or that wants to speak. And so we're seeing it in various communities, whether it's for Palestine, if you're an immigrant rights movement person that has been doing this work for a minute, or mutual aid. Those folks I was talking about were Cop City in Atlanta. There were 60 folks that were picked up in a raid, and then it turned into a federal case. These folks are doing mutual aid, and they're trying to do a RICO case on them. So it's the way that this administration, but also the last one, just in particular, how this government is using the criminal system or criminal injustice system to attack people, is it reads very much into like how people are interpreting the laws themselves versus like with any law or policy. Like it's very blatant in our face who they're coming after.
Thank you, Yesenia. Any other questions for Yesenia? Thank you so much, Yesenia. Thank you for all of that. That's a lot of information, but I know we're all a little bit smarter now and have better understanding. So yeah, if you would get me those links, that would be just absolutely terrific. Jagada Chambers from MassLib has joined us, so I'm going to hold on for 1 second, and I'm going to go to Ben and let him give his few minutes on what housing justice is working on. I know you just had a pretty decent housing justice day on Wednesday, so go for it, Ben.
Yeah, we sure did. And I appreciate, I mean, Sarah was there, I think Ray as well, if that's the same Ray who I got to briefly meet on that day. So in any case, yeah, I'll give a quick highlight of our core priorities this session. Unfortunately, they've been our core priorities, policy goals for a little bit due to some vetoes, and I think just, a tenuous environment down in Carson City when it comes to the realtor and landlord lobby. So first off, we have three. I'll squeeze in a fourth one, but I'll just mention it at the end. And so primarily, I think this is priority number one for us, is summary eviction reform. So again, as I mentioned earlier in our introductions, our vision is to establish a long-term tenant bill of rights that supports renters. And so in many ways, I think, like my dream would be each session to be able to continue to build and expand that foundation. And when it comes to summary evictions, I think we're starting in the negative. We're not even starting from like ground zero. We're trying to like fill in that gap because it's so awful. And so, a quick overview. Every state has a fast track eviction process. They call that a summary process. And as deeply as I wish that didn't exist, that's probably hard to undo. I'm just being real about, I think, our political power and what it would take, to undo that. But when it comes to Nevada, it is uniquely and particularly, I think, burdensome, punitive, and very, very rapid to navigate. And one of the main reasons why that is that the tenant has to file first against themselves with an answer, technically. And so we've looked far and wide across the country in different states. And so there's no other civil procedure where, again, you file first with an answer against yourself. So it's really, ignoring, I think, the stress and the trauma of bracing for an eviction or kind of trying to get rental assistance or scramble to get whatever funds you have to stay housed and not be, very violently displaced. So all that notwithstanding, and again, then you have to initiate against yourself. So what that looks like in practice is that, the landlord, so this is all when it comes to failure of like non-payment of rent. So landlord gets to slap that sticker on your door. It's usually 7-day pay or quit notice. Again, as a tenant, already, I think stressed and worried and trying to keep everything afloat. You have to navigate all that text crammed on a little sticker. It's heavily monolingual, so if you cannot read or understand English, then you're kind of screwed. You're just told to kick rocks. And so often many folks think that's like the final step, and they might self-evict because they feel hopeless or helpless or don't know what next steps to take. And that particularly makes it very hard to track and measure. So how can we know the full extent of evictions in Nevada, either in the lead up to COVID, the impacts of COVID, and the years since, if folks just leave and there's no way to know or understand. Also, what happens very often from there is, say folks make their way to legal aid, like one of the best or like most important institutions, like when navigating some of these awful situations. So often they have to turn folks away simply because there's not time left. And again, that's due to how short that process is. So again, no one should be turned away from getting guidance or counsel or support or maybe accessing rental assistance simply because there's just not enough time. And again, it's like this machine that I think really grinds folks up and then just like discards them or rejects them. Um, and it's really, yeah. So I mean, I think that's a good overview. And so when it comes to reforming that process, the landlord, if they have the issue and they have the power and they have the money, then they should initiate that process. If they, have the grievance or whatever you want to call it, then they should start that, and then the tenant can respond with something formal, clear, and so on. And again, I mean, that's only, as I said, a uphill climb or battle. This to say nothing of what takes place in eviction court. I would invite all folks, or if you have questions, please let me know, to really like spend some time there to see what that process is like and what transpires. Many hearings, or the vast majority, last mere minutes or seconds. So again, the entire like life course of someone's experience is kind of, again, being violently shifted in rapid time. But I mean, that's kind of its own slippery slope of other, I think, conversations or building on protections from there. So again, summary eviction reform, change the filing order, and then we can build from there. And I think they'll make a huge difference. The next two are, one is stronger and clear habitability enforcement. So when we talk about if a place is habitable, that just means livable. So it's safe, that it, again, is accessible, and so on. And so under the current law, if you make a complaint, say if it's a hole in your wall that's just kind of cosmetic and you'd like it patched up, or say your fridge is broken, or you don't have AC during extreme weather throughout the year, if you're in northern Nevada or southern, or maybe you have mold or infestations. When tenants make that request, often they're kind of ignored, disregarded, they're strung along. Yeah, we'll get to it. When really, like, as a landlord, if we're going to give any, I don't know, respect, I think, to that profession, then you should have responsibility to handle those things quickly, if not immediately. And so too often, folks are strung along in awful conditions. Mold might be painted over, I think, is one of like the most awful examples we can use. Or just, again, I mean, it's a long list, and I'm sure maybe folks, might unfortunately know what that's like or have experienced that in their lives. And so, yeah, a clear process with a more rapid response time, so things are addressed quickly. And then there is a piece trying to fix a huge issue there is with, so if your habitability request is not responded to, you're able to withhold your rent. That is legal, but you're supposed to do it through very specific and almost technical means. And if a tenant does not do that correctly, then they'll be evicted. So again, through some like kind of maybe a misstep in the process or misguided, you could have thousands of dollars cash in hand saying, I have my rent right here. And it's like, well, did you put it into an escrow account at the court? Well, then I'm sorry, I must grant the eviction. And all that has because of the negligence of the landlord. So we're really trying to clean that up, prevent some of those awful scenarios, because that does happen frequently to folks. And again, you can see that at the eviction courts. And to make sure folks aren't living, in squalor. So again, it's really about safety, accessibility, dignity, and so on. Last ongoing priority is fee transparency. Again, I think on the spectrum of power, it'd be great to just ban any sort of junk or rental fees. So your rent is your rent, and there's nothing else. But so, in our state's housing crisis and cost of living crisis, we're seeing record high rents. Huge shifts since say 2016 and then 2020, and then we're just kind of stuck in that climate. And so with those high rents, we're seeing fees kind of being decoupled or separated from the rents. So not only did your rent go from $1,200 to $1,900, say in my case, now there are all these new fees that were not there before. So maybe it's tied to utilities, maybe it's tied to some service that they're offering that you didn't really either ask for or they don't even do that well. Like trash valet is something that we see often. Um, and again, I'm sure folks can provide a list of their own experiences. And so as baseline as it is, for us in this moment, it is very important through this legislation that rent is extremely, extremely clear. So like what a person owes month to month should never be a guessing game. It is one clear number that folks can, again, plan for, that there are no surprises. And again, the horror story of those examples, can go on and on. Sue, should I take questions now or should I wait?
Kathy, can you hold on just 1 second?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Thanks, Sue. Last thing I'll say as I conclude, one of the most important long-term priorities, and which we were bringing into the session, and we did as well last session, is rent stability. It's kind of can be tied to the boogeyman of big scary rent control that makes I think industry kind of quiver in their boots. But it is policy that is successful, it is proven, it is studied, and again, if we think about these historic rent increases over the last 4 or 5 or further to 8 years, it seeks to limit that. So say something as simple as a 5% cap, which still allows rent to increase, whatever bottom line that industry, property managers, landlords, and so on are trying to seek. They can still have that, but again, to give folks that assurance that there's no guessing game. Will I be priced out of my home, of my community, of my neighbors, of my neighborhood, and so on. But to be able to go, okay, 5%, I can budget for that. I can expect that. I can anticipate that. And sadly, we had a BDR. And we're working with folks. BDR is just the kind of the earliest stages of a bill, and it missed its deadline. We were not expecting a priority to die, so to speak, so quickly. But I think, being open with the group, and I think as a coalition, we're digging deeper to make sure the folks are being honest and truthful about why and how that happened, and then seeing what ways we can still push for that this session, even though it might look differently. But I think I will say ultimately, when we fight and inevitably one day win rent stability, it won't be in a handful of bills. It will be like our only priority in campaign, because it will take a lot of coordinated effort. So again, yeah, there's a highlight. I hope I made okay time of what we're working on now, what tenants experience, but also deeply deserve, and what we hope to get signed come June 3rd. Yeah, thank you, Sue. Back to you.
Yeah, Ben, you did great. Go ahead, Kathy, with your question.
Thank you for taking my question. Ben, I thought that at the beginning of the legislative session, I saw some information on a bill that was going to go through this current legislature regarding the different payment methods that landlords were allowed to accept, like check, cash, money order, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a representative of a soon-to-be coalition through the Democratic Party here in Nevada that's called the Accessibility Caucus. And I wanted to see about that bill if it exists. I haven't been able to find it since. Because what the original bill neglected to include was the voucher, the housing voucher,
Mm.
as a viable method of payment.
Yeah, let's see. So I think in terms of we'll connect it back to fees and how they're charged and what they look like, and how folks pay for rent. Um, I guess I didn't really name our bills. I'll drop those in the chat so if folks wanted to track them or take a peek at the language or anything. Um, so there's AB 121, which we are working with Assemblymember Considine with, and we kind of jumped to her delayed because we were working on something different. But that's, I guess, neither here nor there. And I need to double check her language if it has that, but I think other bills as well. She may not be our housing champion, but I think Assemblymember Howdigi has AB 280, and I think it has some fees components in there. Um, and that is more, again, as you said, accessibility of like, how can I pay my rent? Because the worst case scenario is that you cannot pay at the office with a check or any of the others traditional means. You have to pay online, and there's a mandatory fee attributed to that online portal, which again is, burdensome, punitive, and not accessible at all. But in terms of when you say vouchers, that brings my mind more to the conversation around source of income protections, or on the other side, discrimination, um, because there's nothing protecting, at least in Nevada, that a landlord has to take certain forms. So they could see a voucher, disability, Social Security, and they could turn their nose at it, even though it's a very consistent and dependable form of income. And I will say, of the 6 bills we had in 2023 last session, 4 of them made it to the governor's desk, all of which were vetoed. Our source of income bill that would have protected vouchers, as an example in this situation, was the first bill to die in committee, which is very interesting that we can push forward conversations around rent stability, eviction reform, and so on. But something about source of income protections was the most threatening or controversial or so on. And I think really reinforces, as I mentioned earlier, the power of industry in that building. And I can link it if it's relevant, but April Corbin Guinness from the Nevada Current wrote a really interesting piece last month about landlord and realtor presence in the legislature. So again, not, taking out lobbyist influence out of the picture, but how many of our elected leaders are landlords themselves, and how much does that skew their own thinking and what their bias and what they support and choose not to support. And so I may have only highlighted 4 really crucial, integral tenant protections, but of 10 or a dozen that we could continue to build on or envision, especially for Nevada. Source of income protections are definitely a core piece of that. I think it's just a matter of, I think picking and choosing session to session, kind of where we're at and what we are pushing for in a given moment. So I hope there's some context so that even though it might not be seeing now, it is still, I don't know.
It's still there.
Yeah, close by. I think we're all playing the long game, especially with our biennial sessions.
Well, here's my one and only question to wrap it all up, because you just set me up for it by mentioning that our governor vetoed the 4 really good housing bills last session. How can we, the bills that are on the table right now are really, really good ones, and we need to get them forward. What do you think the chances are of him signing them this year? What do you think it will take to get him to sign them? Um, how can we support it?
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, so that's the most important piece, I think, of what we're discussing. Um, let's see how to tie all that together nicely. So we know, this session, Governor Lombardo started with a bang of now he's suddenly a housing champion despite, having the veto record. And he has this kind of housing omnibus bill, which I think was introduced Monday the 24th or maybe Monday the 17th. In any case, I haven't um, dove in yet to understand it top to bottom. But again, we know it's about the supply narrative, doesn't read balance power between tenants and landlords, does not protect them. Will release our federal lands, contribute to sprawl, and so on. And so, as he, I think a lot of folks are anticipating, he's chasing, the opportunity to look good and strong as a candidate as he enters his next, or re-election. And I hope that through all of our collective efforts from last session in the interim, building our coalition and new partners, bringing new folks and voices to the table alongside us, that we can create that pressure, so that, I hope we can at least get one or two out of the three, especially just with kind of the presentation of them. And that's what kind of makes difficult rent stability dying, is that he's so adamant, but that hoping that one we could sacrifice to a veto and making the other ones look more appealing or palatable. And so that is tricky. But I know it's a tough balance. I don't have like such a strong and clear answer for you, Sue. But I know that, Democrats are also taking advantage of the opportunity to put the pressure on him, make him look bad. But it's also about holding them accountable as well. Because whether they are true housing champions or just picking it up now because it's fashionable and it's easy, making sure all folks, come to bear. But as we enter this second half of session, I think we'll have, increasingly more clear answers to what you asked, Sue.
Perfect. That's all we need. And yeah, just understand that even though a lot of these bills were presented this past week, it doesn't mean it's over. That was only to the committee. We got to get through the committee, and then we have to get through the actual House, whether it Assembly or Senate. From there, then it goes to the other House, and we start all over again. So a lot's going to be happening over the next 64 days to get these bills through. So if Ben would put those bill numbers in there, if you all have your ability to track them, I mean, they're all bills Nevada Now is tracking, but if you have the ability to track them, so you can show up for a hearing, numbers mean something. You can put in an opinion for it. You can contact your representatives, your assembly member, your senator, and let them know these things are important to you, not just these housing bills, but everything that we're talking about today and have talked about before. So thank you so much, Ben. I truly appreciate it. We'll keep that conversation going. And next time I will wave to you at the legislative session. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you so much. All right. Yeah, Leslie, I've got Jagada. I know you're here. Do you want to say hello first?
I definitely can. Greetings. How you doing, Miss Sue? Hello, everyone. Um, Definitely excited to be with you all this evening.
Thank you, Jagada. Leslie, I know you were gonna do the fines and fees and touch on some mass libs, so I don't know if you want to work in coordination with Jagada or
I'll even jump in and hand it to you, Les, right when I get to 91.
Okay, yeah, because I'm gonna have to hop off like right around 5. So I'll pass it to
Oh,
Jagada.
you should go first, Les. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Leslie, go ahead. Jagada's
So in terms of Fines and Fees Justice Center, we have 3 major bills that we're kind of working on. The first one being AB 218. AB 218 is going to create a court reminders program, which basically just means that you'll get text messages about your court date, and you'll also have the ability to kind of reschedule your court date if necessary through the text messages, the same way we get texts from our doctor's office, from restaurants when we go out to eat, etc. It's in that same vein of this is kind of related to human behavior. It is about more people getting to court and just making that more accessible. So that has already made it out of session. It's going to be, out of the committee. So it's going to be going to a floor vote sometime before April 11th, and then it'll be headed over to the Senate. The other bill is SB 120. which basically mandates free payment plans and ends public defender fees. So if you set up a payment plan on money owed to the courts, you have to pay a fee in order to set up the payment plan, which doesn't make sense because if you need to be on a payment plan, then you already had issues paying the entire amount up front. So it doesn't make sense from a human perspective and also just a financial perspective to extract additional monies from people who already couldn't afford the fine. So it's going to eliminate the fee that's charged to get on a payment plan. And then it's going to end public defender fees, which again, people who have a public defender is because they cannot afford their own attorney. And therefore, why would we be charging them to use that service? So that's again, SB 120, it's just really targeting those two sets of fees. And then lastly, there's SB 88, which this is just ending medical debt upon release for people getting out of prison. People are getting out of prison and owing $10,000, $20,000 to NDOC because of having to pay for their own medical. So that we're just ending that practice. We're in alignment with NDOC on this as well. So it's kind of a no-brainer. We're not going to be letting people get out anymore with an astronomical amount of debt over their head when they're already trying to kind of reacclimate to society and rebuild their lives. So those are the three FFJC bills. And then on the mass lib side, we're working on the Second Look Act, which is, very political. It's a very political process and bill. So I'll pass it to Jagada to kind of talk about where we're at with AB 91.
I just want to ask you one quick question just to before we go on to that. On AB 218, the court reminder, I think some of us, you mentioned about with doctors' offices and such that we're all kind of used to getting those kind of text message reminders. Can you kind of put it into perspective how those court reminders will help people in the way of not losing time from work or, transportation, et cetera, just to get a clearer picture? Thank you.
Yeah. That's basically what you just said in a nutshell is what the bill is and does. So it is simply having reminders that come from the court about your court day. There's a whole psychology behind it in terms of like when those messages go out, if it's 3 days before the hearing or 24 hours, like there's actually a reminder science that that comes into play here in terms of how they set it up. Each court is going to set it up in their own way. So the mandate is just that they have to do it.
Thank you. Okay. Now, did you want to turn it over to Jagada?
Yeah, go. And then I'm going to have to hop off, but thank you for the call and thank you for all of the information. Ben, Yesenia, I want to shout y'all out and hopefully I'll be in touch.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate it. This is, like I said to Ben, this is an ongoing conversation, especially during legislative sessions. So if there's any way we can help, stand up. We're going to get these bill numbers out there again to follow. I know we're already following. Is that 91? Is that the second look bill? Okay. See what we can do to have your backs. So, thank you, Leslie. I think she's gone. Okay. All right, go ahead, Jagada.
Greetings again, Ms. Sue. Thank you. I do want to just preface by piggybacking off what you said. Those deadlines are approaching. They have to be voted and through committee on April 11th. The next 2 weeks will be super fast and obviously have a great deal of urgency. And if they do get through to committee, they need to be voted on and through the floor that the floor that they started on by the 22nd of April. So again, the next 25 days will be ultra important and which substantiates this conversation. I'll thank you. I'll be brief. Mass liberation, like all of us, there's 1,000 bills that we're engaged in. There were over 7,300 juvenile arrests in the last Department of Juvenile Justice Services report. That's the most I've known in the history. Over 35 arrests by Clark County School District Police and another 3,500 arrests by Metro. So again, a lot of our energy is focused on that juvenile justice aspect. Senator Orenshaw has a bill, SB 140. It's really going to impact the juvenile justice or the juvenile court system, where there is already a test for autistic behavior, stuff that goes on in our juvenile courts. They're adding fetal alcohol syndrome testing. It's a very expensive test that doesn't often get used because of that. They're trying to make a way that our court systems have that. We know the propensity for our youth to be suffering from that, being born under the alcoholic use of a parent. Definitely impacts youth of color at I think 6% rate of higherness. So we are very appreciative of Senator Orenshaw on this piece of legislation. He has the juvenile courts in support, so we're very hopeful for that. Another bill is around the same thing, that youth violence component. There were over 400 firearms confiscated by law enforcement of youth, which again was the biggest number that I've ever known in my time in Las Vegas. We all have to be definitely immersed in changing the culture of that. Senate Bill 156, it's actually being carried by Senator Edgar Flores. Again, it's gonna potentially open up an Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the state of Nevada. It has been a system that has permeated different jurisdictions with a lot of success. I was able to be in space talking through the legislation with a gentleman in another jurisdiction that has it, to help guide and impact the senator's legislation. So again, this piece of legislation has the potential to really impact and curb gun violence as we know it. Southern Nevada obviously has more of a propensity for gun violence, but we know for sure it impacts our folks in Washoe County as well as the rules. Another piece of legislation that just got some language is Assembly Bill 534. Mass Liberation Project has been instrumental for since back in 2018 primary elections of making sure our folks who are currently incarcerated in city and county jails know that they can still vote civically and participate as long as they are not convicted of a felony or serving felony time. Usually our folks are in a pretrial state, but that legislation was really cemented last session with the passage of Assembly Bill 286, carried by Chairwoman Brittany Miller. That took the investment we had made into another level. It actually progressed with having polling locations inside of the jail, which was a big deal. For again, it's not just to make people vote. To me, it's a tool for civic engagement, education, family reunification. If you get invested in what we're doing politically, more times than not, you can have a conversation and a dialogue in your household about that. So we are definitely intentional about making sure we edify and educate that. And AB 534 really take that to another level, making sure the system that our folks use to vote when they're abroad is available for folks who are currently incarcerated in a pretrial state. Finally, I'll just piggyback on Leslie mentioned in AB 91. It has definitely drawn a great deal of attention. The goal of the legislation is to get folks who have been incarcerated over 25 years, over 15 years, to get another look at their case. We have a gentleman who's been incarcerated nearly 50 years, who's 86 years old. It serves no purpose no more. So some folks, we just want to get another review, but the particular set that we were after, let's just say it's causing a little strife in that building. So yeah, go figure, right, Miss Sue? Go figure. It's causing a little strife in the building. So we are, pivoting, and really it's challenging Mass Liberation Project. We've never really had to stand on something to this extent. We have a lot of people, nearly 1,000 people that this legislation could potentially impact. So we want it written another way. And if it's not written that way, we might have to be able to not support the legislation as it goes forward. And it's kind of new water for us, but needless to say, I'm excited and invested in hope that you, Miss Sue, and your crew can definitely support and get involved over these stretched ones, especially these next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Okay. Any questions? I'm here.
Yeah, thank you, Jagada. Yeah, the AB 91, that's a second look bill. And if you think about it, there are people that have been incarcerated, as Jagada said, maybe 15 years ago, uh, for something. I'm just gonna throw something out there for maybe marijuana charges. Okay, it's probably not legit, but let's just say marijuana charges. But in the meantime, the law has changed, and the the sentencing has changed. Am I right, Jacada? Yeah. That in the course of their serving their time, the maximum sentencing or whatever has changed. So now their sentence is longer than what it should have been, or what new prisoners are getting. Am I anywhere close?
You're fire spot on. Man, you could go on a tour around this country. You got it locked in.
Yeah.
And the only caveat I would add is that oftentimes, especially here in Nevada, we've had legislation that changed exactly what's going on legally, but they don't allow it to be retroactive to impact the people that it's been handed down to years before. And this would be an avenue for that peculiar set to have a way back.
Yeah, because let's just say someone was sentenced to 10 years, but 10 years ago, but now someone for the same crime is being sentenced to 5 years. So, well, so it's really, I think it's an important bill. I'm glad it's shaking things up. Make people think a little bit. Anybody have questions for Jacada? I've got the list of bill numbers, and I know some of my note takers out there. We're writing them all down. But again, yeah, it's gonna be crazy time for the next couple of weeks. Uh, nobody lose it. We're all fine. We'll see what makes it through. But I just truly want to thank our guest speakers today. Just appreciate them taking the time. This is an important conversation, and once again, an ongoing conversation. And we just truly need to support work in community, and support those that may not be able to support themselves, and just be additional voices. I'm going to tell you a couple of things we got coming up on April 12th. We're going to be at the UNLV Powwow for the Planet at Cox Pavilion. So if you want to come out and hang out with me for the afternoon, that would be great. I'm trying to think what else we have. I think that's all we've got going on. Any questions, anything? Ben, do you have any final words, anything?
No, I had just dropped that we should work together formally as well as informally. So, maybe we could work on that.
I asked about that a couple years ago. We'll have that other conversation. But yes. Oh, Kathy, you got another question?
I do. Are we having a hands-off thing on the 5th?
I'm not personally. I know there's some organizations doing some stuff on the 5th. I'm working that day, so I haven't jumped in to do anything.
Oh,
But
okay.
everybody feel free to jump in on, I think there's some stuff. I think Indivisible Las Vegas is doing something. Um, I can't remember now, but yeah, I've heard chatter from other national now thing. Hey, Anisha.
Hi. I wanted to know if you guys could put some of this information into the chat because I have a kind of a bigger social media platform and a lot of people are wanting to be informed and they don't know where to go.
What is it you want to know?
Just kind of more so about how some people can get active, because more people are wanting to be active and show up for things.
I can email you some stuff directly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Anisha is a nursing student soon to graduate. So
One more week to go.
one more week. And then she's looking to SEIU, Sarah. All right. Well, with nothing else, I'm going to stop this recording because I just don't like looking at my